I'm Bob Knote, and on this episode of the Camp Chaos Chronicles, I'm going to present a new machine that I'm bringing online in my never-ending search for efficiency and productivity. And I just burned up the last available floor space that I've got to put anything around this place. I need a bigger shop. So what is this mystery machine that I'm bringing online here? Well, it's a Sioux valve grinder and seat reconditioning setup. It's something that I bought a couple of years ago, and the purpose of it is to speed things up around here, because there's a lot of people that you can find that'll do the work and do a really good job, but the problem is it takes about 4 weeks to get through the queue because they are good at what they do. So it always was my intention to do this, but the problem is that these machines are fairly expensive, except that this one I got for $300, and it was a mess. And the whole purpose of this next 3 episodes is to make it not awful anymore. Now, as I showed you in last year's series, this thing is just as it came in the door here. It's really, really dirty. And I thought, based on that assessment, that this was going to take a tremendous amount of work to make it usable. But the fact is that the only thing I really had to do was to take that chuck apart and clean it. And the valves center perfectly right now. So with the exception of the coolant not being hooked up, this thing is perfectly usable. The problem is I can't stand walking in the room and looking at this thing. So I got to start on cleaning it up. And that's the way it looks underneath all that grime, which means it's not horrible. It's got some scratches here and there. I managed to find an actual decal, which isn't identical, but it works. The problem is that this stuff it's been just caked on here for decades. This was built in the mid-60s to mid-70s, and it's just horrific. And I just wonder, how can you let a tool that is as valuable, and I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about what this thing enables you to do. Why would you allow this thing to get in this condition? The inside's not a whole lot better than the outside. Now, the good news here is that I bought it for $300, and this door was jammed, so it couldn't be opened. And it turns out that there's a complete valve seat grinding setup in here as well. So my $300, it was worth every penny. Fact of the matter is, I'm using this right now to do the heads on a high-end restoration that I'm currently involved with for a client. So let's get this thing cleaned up. It's pretty ugly as it is. Now, this was the easy part. I decided to start out on the base to get some idea of what sort of solvents and implements were going to work on this operation. And you can see that up on the top here, this was the toughest part right here, because this had accumulated a large or a thick layer of whatever the cutting material or grinding lubricant that they were using. It was actually baked on the top here. So what I had to do is take a putty knife and scrape off that thick layer. And then it was kind of the same thing as it was on the sides and on the front. And on the inside, it was a matter of taking acetone and dissolving the remaining grease. And you had to get it off right away. You had to work with a very small area at a time and loosen the grease and then wipe it up immediately. Paper towels didn't work. Those red shop rags that you can buy at Harbor Freight were worthless. What works is old t-shirts and old cotton sheets, cotton bed sheets. That stuff works perfectly. And just a little bit at a time, sort of went over the whole thing, do a rough clean, and then came back with clean rags, a lot of clean rags, and did the rest. And what we can see is that it really does look pretty darn good. What I'm after here, I don't want to paint the whole thing. What I'm after here is I want this to look like a machine that's been well used, but it's been cared for over the years. And if you remember what this looked like, this is a whole different world in here now. I've got the majority of my cylinder head tools stored in here. And yeah, this motivates me to get the rest of this thing done, which is over here. Now, you can see that I've already got a start on it. This is I started with the cast iron cover for the collet and the drive for it. And what worked on the cabinet isn't going to work here, because acetone, I started out with a small area underneath here, and I learned very quickly that acetone is going to go straight down to the casting. So what I'm using at this point is naphtha, and that works just as well as the acetone, and to be honest, it doesn't stink anywhere near as bad. I'm not sure what the health ramifications are of using this stuff, but I got that fan right there that we're going to employ to keep this area ventilated. So you can see that cleans up pretty well. You can see that it's worn. There's paint worn off a corner there, but you know, I really like that. Again, as I said, what I'm looking for here is a certain level of patina that indicates use, but also well maintained. Now, the problem is that I'm not going to be able to clean this thing assembled like this. What I'm going to have to do is pull that unit off, this unit off, and then the base. And then you can see right there, there's a cast resin tray that has a little trough that runs along the front of it here to a reservoir for the coolant. And the coolant is provided by this thing right here. There's a little pump right here that it collects in, and you plug that in. And I think there's I don't know this for sure, but I think this plugs into a socket on the machine, and it turns on when you turn on the switch for the machine. I think. I'll have to check into that. So now I've looked at some YouTube videos on rebuilding these things, and it turns out that either this is a later unit with more features on it, or they had many different levels of tool, and this one is kind of the deluxe. So I'm really, really pleased with this. As I said, I've got a $300 investment here, and I haven't put anything in it except for buying a gallon can of acetone. And that's it. This will be the third set of cylinder heads that I've used this on, and it's already paid for itself. So let's get this thing apart. Well, this looks like a good place to start. Well, I got it torn down as far as I want to take it at this point. I suppose I could pull this stuff out of here, but you know what? I think I'm going to have to find a manual, because there appears to be a number of adjustments that need to be made on this thing when I put it back together again. So I'm going to want to keep that to a minimum. Everything here, bushings are all in good working order. Everything rotates nice and freely. One thing that I noticed early on when I was trying to get this thing running was that this rod that turns on the switch in the back here, which turns on the motor for the grinder and the motor for the collet, as well as it's got a plug-in on the side here, an outlet to plug in the coolant supply. This had a pretty good bend in it. It wouldn't work. In fact, it was disconnected when I got it. I had to plug it in in order to get it to turn on. So I pulled the rod out and I straightened it out, but it appears like it could actually be straightened more. So we're going to do that. It works well. One of the big repair jobs is going to be this thing right here. This is a tray that fits right here. And as all the coolant comes off of the machine, it collects in this tray and it goes down here to a collection point, which should be the tank of the coolant reservoir. So this thing has been beaten up pretty good. It's got several chunks out of the edges. It appears like it's poured out of resin. And I mean, it shouldn't be a big deal. What I intend to do is to start out with the base, and then once I get that cleaned up, then I'll take it over there, set it on top of the cabinet, and just reassemble it on the cabinet, which makes sense right now. But I think once I get it rolling around on the top of that cabinet, it's probably going to end up right here.